Hello everyone, this is Julia. Thank you so much for joining me on my craft room adventures. Today, I have this really cute get well card to share with you. Unfortunately, my dad is currently in the hospital, and due to the COVID regulations, of course, we're not allowed to visit, which really sucks, but understandable. So I wanted to make him like a happy get well card that he could put on his nightstand and just look at so that the scene would basically be, I know you're not doing that well, you're stuck in bed, but soon you'll be having fun again and you'll be flying again. So I'm using stamps by My Favorite Things. This one is the All Tucked In, and the one with a plain is the Sky High. And I was actually inspired by a card by Tammy Stark. I will link to her Instagram down below because she's absolutely incredible. And she recently made a card that had like a thought bubble up top. And that's where I got the idea, and I really love it. So please go check her out. I'm sure you already know her, but in case you don't, she's incredible. So for my coloring, just fair warning, I know this video is pretty long and most of it's coloring because there are so many and such large images on it, but I really wanted to leave most of it in case you would be interested in seeing it. Let me know if you want me to just like cut those parts out or just make them shorter or even slow it down if you'd be interested in seeing more of the coloring. Just let me know what you would like to see. So just getting back to the images, I'm starting with the E47, which is actually quite a bit darker than even the darkest shade of the E30s, which to me is a little weird, but it works, so it's fine. Then I blended out the E47 with E39, and then E37, and now I'm going in with E35, just blending that out a little bit more. I wanted there to be quite a big contrast between like the shadow areas and the light areas. I'm blending that out further with E33. And then going over everything with E31. I did skip the coloring of the rest of the like wooden pieces, like the nightstand and the picture frames, because I colored those exactly the same way as I did this. And this part I'm leaving in because I actually, as you can see, colored over the edge. So I'm just using the colorless blender to push back the color. But what you really want to do is use your heat tool or like a hair dryer to dry the area as quickly as you can, because otherwise the color can just bleed back into the area that you just cleaned up, and it can actually make it look worse. So you do need to dry the alcohol right away, and then it looks fine. Then I'm coloring in the little fish bowl and the clouds with the BG quadruple zero and BG10. And I also added a little bit of the B21 and the rim of the glass. I wanted there to be a red blanket, so I'm using R39 as my darkest shade. And I'm blending that out with R37. And also the R35, just pulling in the color gradually further. Then blending that out with R32. And the R35 and the R32 don't mix that well. So I just went over it again with the R35, then the R32, because when you add a few layers, they tend to mix quite a bit better. And I just made the highlight areas a little bit smaller. Then for my blues, I'm using B30s mostly, but my darkest shade, I don't have such a dark shade of the B30s, so I'm using B99 as my darkest shade for my blues. Just adding it in all the areas that would be in shadow. Then I'm blending that out with B28. Just basically going over the exact same areas, not pulling the color much further, but just to add a little bit more of the like shade of the B20, I'm sorry, I'm using B20s, not B30s. My mistake, sorry. But I just went over the B99 with the B28 just to add a little bit more of that bright blue shade, but not pulling the shaded areas in too far. Then I went in with B23 and then finally B21. I'm also using the same colors on the pillow, just adding the shading around my little bunny. Then going in again, just over the exact same areas with B28. Then with B26, just to blend that out. And I'm pretty sure I forgot to mention that on the blanket, but of course I also used the B26 there. Then I'm blending that out with B23, and then B21 for my highlight shade. Just going back in with B23 and then the B21. And I'm using a little bit of C1 and C0 for the inside of the pillowcase, and a little bit of the C00 for the, the mattress, for the mattress cover. I'm using C3. And then I'm also using the C00. For my greens, I'm using BG99 as my darkest shade. And then I'm blending that out with YG67, YG63, and YG61. The little decorative edge of the blanket and also the slippers at the bottom I just colored off camera with the same shades that I already used. And now I'm just using YR14, YR12, YR23, and Y00 as my orange-yellow combo. Then I'm using Y13, Y11, and Y00 for my moon. And also adding a little bit of YR18 for my goldfish, just to add a bit more depth there. And also adding some YR12 to the moon, blending that out with Y11. I'm using E11 for the little pig. Then I'm blending that out with E00, going in with the second layer of the E11, and then again with E00, and finally blending out with E000. I'm adding a little bit of the R20 just to add more of a pinkish hue, and then again blending out with E000. I'm also using E30 markers for my little bear, so I'm going in with E37, and then I'm blending that out with E31 and E30. A little bit of E33, and again with E30. And for the bunny, I'm using E40 markers, so I'm going in with E44 just around the edges, then blending that out with E43. Then E41 and just pulling the color further into the center and then blending everything together with E40. Using a little bit of R20 on the cheeks and inside the ears. And I also colored the little bunny in the picture in the same shades. Just adding a little bit more blush. I also added the same B20 shades on the little bluebird up top. And then I'm going in with Cool Grace for my plain. I'm using C5 as my darkest shade. Then I realized that that wasn't quite dark enough, so I will be going in with C7. Basically over the exact same area, just to add a bit more of a deeper shade. And I actually stopped coloring in the little rivets. Is that what it's called? I'm not sure. The little circles, because I didn't want to blend them out, so I will be coloring them in later. I blended out the C7 with a C5, and now I'm blending that out with C3. Then I'm going in with C1, just you know, pausing in between to make sure that I get the like shading and intensity that I wanted. Then I'm going in with C0, then blending everything together with C00, and I color the remaining gray pieces off camera with the exact same color combination. And then I'm going in with C7 and filling in the little circles, the what are called rivets, and also the like areas between the sections of the plane, just to add more depth there. Then I'm going in with the same blue shades that I used on the bed. I'm starting with B28, and I'm blending that out with B26, just pulling the color in a little bit further, then blending that out with B23, then going in with a little bit of the B99, again going over that with B28 just to just change the shade of it a little bit, then going back in with the B26 and the B23, and finally blending everything together with B21. Then also using the same green shades as before, I'm going in with BG99 as my deepest green shade, blending that out with YG67, YG63, and finally YG61. Then I'm just adding a little bit more shading to the rotors, again with the same cool gray shades as before, and just adding a bit more shading to the plane. I wanted there to be a bit more contrast between the highlighted areas and the shaded areas, because once I added the blue, the gray wasn't quite defined enough, I found. Then I'm also using BG quadruple 0 on the little windshield, going back in with R37, the same red as before, then R35, R32, and then R30. I'm not using the R39 in this case because I wanted to keep those a little bit lighter. Just blending the colors back and forth, adding another layer of the R37, and then blending that out with R30. Then for my fox, I'm going in with some warm red-brown shades. My first one is E18. I'm blending that out with E15. And I only use the E18 quite sparingly because I didn't want the fox to get too dark. Same goes for the E15. I wanted there to be quite a bit of definition, but not that the image gets too dark. And I'm blending that out with E13, which is a lighter shade of the reddish brown. Again, going in with a little bit more definition with the E15. Blending that out again with the E13. And finally using E11 as my lightest shade. Then I'm using some cool grays on the white areas of the fox just to match the remaining images. And also adding some R20 on the cheeks. Just blending that out with the colorless blender. Then I'm going in with E33 for the lighter areas of my little hedgehog, blending that out with E31 and then E30, but I wanted there to be a bit more definition, so I'm also bringing in E37 just to add a bit more depth, and then going back in with E33, E30, just to blend everything together. Then I'm also adding a little bit of blush there, but the R20 was just a little bit too light, so I'm also bringing in R21. Again, making sure that I dry the alcohol quickly if I feel there's a risk of the color running. Then I'm going in with E79. I wanted some cool brown shades for the outer part of the hedgehog. I'm blending that out with E77, E74, and finally E70. I colored the little banner, just added a tiny bit of shading with the cool grays off camera, and now I'm using neutral gray markers to color in the mountains. I'm starting with N7, then I'm blending that out and adding some more shaded areas with N5, just below the snow caps of the mountains. Then I'm going in with N3. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that my marker cap was off camera there, but I'm just blending out the N5 with N3. And the N1 and N0 I only have in the classic Copic marker, but I do want to get the brush nips for those eventually, because those were only available in classic and the time when I wanted to get them. So I'm having a little bit of trouble blending with a like small nib because I find the super brush nib works just so much better. But I'm just going in with the N1 and N0, just adding a few layers, trying to blend the colors. Also trying to use the chisel nib. Just going over everything a few times to get rid of the lines. And I'm also bringing in the C00 just to blend everything together because I figured that with a brush it would be a little easier and that worked fine. So I'm also adding the little bit of BG quadruple zero on the snow caps of the mountain. And I also use the same red shades to color in the heart on the banner that the plane is pulling. Then it's time to work on my background. I'm using Tumbled Glass and Salty Ocean Distress ink. I masked off a section at an angle for the top because that is where my mountain range will go. So I just marked it on the panel, then I added some post-it note tape, and then I'm ink blending quite a lot of the tumbled glass. I also switched from a brush to a blending sponge because that puts down a lot more color. Then I'm going in with Salty Ocean, and I wanted it to be like a nice, bright blue sky. And this tumbled glass and Salty Ocean is just my favorite combination for that. Just blending everything back and forth until I'm happy with the intensity. Adding quite a bit more of the Salty Ocean. Making sure to wipe off my brush before I go into the lighter area so that I don't contaminate the light color. Then I'm removing the post-it note tape and just adding it to the top section. I'm just using a DIY stripe stencil that I just made with my die cut my electronic die cutting machine. And I'm ink blending some tumbled glass and then also some Salty Ocean just to create the look of wallpaper. Just carefully swiping the color because I didn't want the stripes to be too dark, but just a little bit of light blue so that it would match the colors up top. There you can see that I had quite a bit too much on my brush, but since I'm using Bristol, I was able to blend it out quite nicely. And then I'm also ink blending a piece of wood grain cardstock with Hickory Smoke, just for the wood flooring part of my scene. I'm adding quite a bit more shading where the bed will go, just so that that area is darker. And then I'd also die cut a little strip of wood grain cardstock, and I'm adding a lot of the Hickory Smoke onto that so that it's the baseboard which is darker than the rest. Then I'm just adding liquid glue to add those. And when I went to add the baseboard, I realized that it basically blended into each other. It was way too light. So I just picked it back up while the glue wasn't fully dry yet. And then I'm adding more of the Hickory Smoke and also some black soot onto it, just so that there's a clear difference between the two colors. And I like that much better. So again, adding more glue and placing that down. Then I'm adding my mountain range, and I used the Grassy Knoll dies by Hello Bluebird to cut the cloud edge. Then I also die cut some small clouds from, I believe it's the Happy Village stamp set by Fawn, but I'm not quite sure right now. I will make sure to list it below to cut out the little clouds that basically make up my little thought bubble pieces. Is that a word? I don't know, but you know what I mean, I'm sure. Then I'm also adding in the rest of the scenery elements. I'm adding the picture frames to the wall, then the nightstand with the fishbowl up top, making sure that it's nicely lined up behind the bed. And then I'm also adding the slippers, and I'm adding everything down flat except for the bed and the plane. Those are I will adhere with foam tape. Then I'm adding some clouds. And up until this point, I knew what kind of sentiment I wanted to use, but I hadn't figured out where I wanted to place it yet, and that is what will cause me some issues in just a little bit. I went ahead and stamped my sentiment, which is from the Sky High stamp set. For you, the sky's the limit, because I just thought it would be, like a nice uplifting kind of a sentiment, even though you're not doing well now, you will be soon. So I just hate embossed that in white, and I used the Lawn Fawn simple sentiment strips or simple sentiment banners, and I just die cut that. And so I removed the top cloud again because that was the place where I needed the sentiment to go. So I just placed the cloud down a little bit lower, and I knew that the rest of the background that I kind of messed up by pulling everything up would be covered by the sentiment banner. So I just adhered that one down flat. Then I'm adding the bed, like I said, with some thin foam squares on the back. And then also adding the plane with foam squares. And then I'm just adding the little bluebird, again, right behind the plane. And then I'm using some shimmer pen on the clouds and also on the mountaintops and the speech bubble part. Then I'm adding some Stardust Stickles, just, it's a magical dream. So it only occurred to me at that point when I already started that it was for my dad, so it was a man probably not that fond of glitter. But once you commit to glitter, you gotta go all out. So I just did it like I normally would. And he likes it, so it's all good. Then I'm just adding some crystal glaze on the fishbowl. And that finishes off my card for today. I really hope you like this one, and maybe it gives you an idea for someone who could use a little positivity, like a happy card in their lives. Thank you so very much for joining me today and for spending this time with me. I will leave a link to the Butterfly Reflections ink blog post down below in the description box, as well as all of the products that I used. I will be back soon with a new crafty video, so I hope you'll join me for that as well. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!